Hey guys, welcome back to another Architecture Real Talk. And this is a very special episode because we're also going to do an Architect React. Thank you guys for all your support. I have finally reached 1,000 subscribers. With that said, the special topic that I have selected is my hometown, Houston. So Houston has a flooding problem. And it floods here all the time. There's multiple reasons why it floods, how it floods, and the reasons why we can mitigate these floods even better in the future. And because of that, this is what the talk's about. So let's dive right into it. Houston is comprised of interconnected lakes and streams and channels. And pretty much we have an interconnected network of wetlands and marshland. It's a delicate balance that already a city has. Now, just to give you the interconnected nature of Houston, that Lake Conroe drains into Houston Lake. And being that far apart, you are still connected. And at the same time, we are comprising of new gates right now and looking at 5 different gates that can be installed to mitigate the water from a 200-meter height all the way down to 40 feet that is inside Sam Houston. Now, all of these are strategies that we're working with nature to drain water better from Houston. Flooding occurs when we have drench of water. And this is happening worse and worse because as we have flood map provided by FEMA saying that this should be a 100-year flood, that should be a 1,000-year flood, that's a 500-year flood, none of which are actually lining up with the events that are occurring. In the last 10 years, we'd had 2 100-year flood and Harvey being one in a 1,000-year flood. So how can this be? Imagine if you had a paper towel and water was drenched on top of it. Every time you drop 5 drops of water, would it make the same pattern on this paper towel? No. And just like a city, you have low points and high points. Wherever it rains more, it gets eroded there more. So these maps are constantly changing. They should be revised almost every time we have a massive downpour or we have a large cataclysmic event, such as a hurricane or any type of tide or surge. It completely erodes away and changes the way the city is naturally. Now, even despite having this interconnected nature of water in the city, marshlands and wetland, the water is not swept away from these properties as quickly as it needs to be. And with an ever-growing population of Houston being a very large metropolitan city, you have this issue of constantly having concrete islands being developed. And because of that, the flooding is getting further worsened because you have lack of permeable ground. You have ground that is like asphalt or ground that has gone through a lot of drought and is hardened over time, so water just floats over it and doesn't get absorbed into the ground. And because of that, you have a lot more watershed, and that water has to go somewhere. So let's look at the potential solutions that Houston has. So one of the things, if you look at it in a broad scale of thing, we have Galveston with a seawall that prevents the water from coming further into shore and destroying further into the city. Now, if you were to look at it from a reservoir point of view, in 1940s, we had 2 reservoirs to the west of Houston. And these reservoirs acted as a way to channel water slowly towards the Buffalo Bayou. And this will control the water as it is actually coming towards the downtown of Houston. And all of these is added to the already existing natural channels by having more supplemental bayous and storm drainage added into the city grid. So we have a whole network of natural bayou systems that are also getting eroded every time it rains. Be certain, as you drive around Houston, you will find water being collected in multiple ways because water is clogging up these pipes. There's mud erosion, and with a clay soil and being surrounded by wetland and marshland, we're literally living on islands which are dry. Now, when we get to individual properties, is the properties has to have, by designation, a detention pond or a retention pond. And a detention pond, by definition, is just a large piece of land that pretty much doesn't have anything built upon it, and it just simply collects water for temporary reasons before it taps back into these channels to further flow out back into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, when it comes to retention pond, these ponds already retain water to a certain extent. When it comes to this micro area, you can have these as gardens, you can have these as pools, these can double as fountains, but these hold a small amount of temporary water which can further double up into retaining water when there is a large storm. Now, what the city has done is, over the course of last 2 decades, we have gone from about 0.2 cubic feet of water being stored on each property per square foot to about an average of 0.65 cubic feet, meaning about triple the amount of water is stored per square feet for every development that is coming after. Now, despite this, we had an increased growth in concrete all over Houston. We're continuously sprawling out and building in lands where we shouldn't have. Looking back at Harvey, one of the things that happened is the reservoir were pushed beyond their point. The levees overflooded, and we have gone even beyond what Brazos could hold back. And eventually, the levees caved. And what ends up happening is it's no longer a bowl that was holding water. In fact, it's the bowl that has spilled over. So entire neighborhoods were disrupted, and guess what? That changed the flood landscape as we know it. So the water doesn't have to follow a floodway. It can create its own floodway depending on where the pressure is. So the city, by choice, released the reservoir to protect downtown Houston by actually destroying Cinco Ranch. Now, these are all ethical decisions, but one of the key phenomena for me is, if Houston continues to progress in this manner, where we have these random spotted detention ponds that are holding pools of water, they have no purpose in society. They technically has no purpose in terms of programmatic element. How can you further integrate them into city? And how can you have government actually allow this to happen on commercial properties? Now, what I think is the suggestion, or one of the solution, is to look at Rotterdam Square or Rotterdam Water Square. So let's go ahead and take a look at that together. So what we're going to be looking at is the water square at Rotterdam. So one of the things that you'll see that is a striking feature as you're analyzing this video is that this is an urban landscape, and it is a concrete jungle as well, just like Houston. And the issue that they're having is that constant water is pooling all around this particular plaza. And what they have designed is a feature inside the garden that allows you to have this park-like element. What if we start looking at Houston housing in the same manner? What if, rather than asking a commercial property to have a detention pond, or to have a subdivision have a detention pond, you ask a subdivision to provide a pool or a garden or a water feature that is included in the community garden, right? What if you ask a commercial property that you're gonna get a certain level of lead point if you were to merge your detention pond with the parking garage? What if you mix the parking with the actual area that's retail that's supposed to be used? What if they can become a park-like element? What if you have an indoor-outdoor spaces? And the reason we do not mix those things is because increasing the outside surface area of the commercial property adds to the actual amount of construction costs. You have so much area that needs to be exterior cladded. So what if you just merge the parking lot and the actual water feature together? Can we lower our detention requirement? Can we retain water for a longer period of time? What if the city mandates that there's a programmatic element to the actual detention pond? So another project that comes to mind is a project that's being done in New York. And this project pretty much entails what we face in Galveston all the time. You had a Sandy storm hit New York, and it pretty much changed the entire edge of the city. It redefined their shorelines. And because of that, they're looking to big Bjarke Ingels to answer what can be done with our city. And this is what Bjarke has to come up with. that it can't simply be a wall, it can't be a stationary levee that has to be pushed through. Rather, it has to be a programmatic element that invites people, that doubles as a functional wall. And as you have these cultural spaces, you have active spaces, you have gyms, you have water parks. What if you put an Olympic-sized stadium for a high school, but that doubles as a detention pond, and it's an exterior pools? The idea of even having exterior pools to begin with to become a future retention pond is already an innovation in its own right. Granted that it takes a lot longer to maintain, purify the pool, make it swimmable, habitable, but I'm saying add a function to it. Now, when we look at this, is a very simple idea, but this fauna, flora, layering it into all the way down to coastal coral region, what you end up having is now a procession of a program. It's redefining your shoreline. It's redefining where you want your city to end. And this is what the big team wanted to do. With that said, I hope I have answered your questions on why Houston floods and how we can mitigate this issue. If you guys have any ideas how the city is now further evolving it, I know they're installing new gates, but if you have further idea of what can be done, what is being done in your country, please leave a comment below. Until next time. Follow for more content.